name is Jocelyn Wiltz. I am a graduate student at the University of Texas at Arlington School of Nursing. I'm going to be discussing personal behavioral theory. First of all, let's discuss personality, which is a person's conscious and subconscious. Personality is the key that manipulates a person's decision-making skills. The choices that a patient or person makes tends to reveal their personality. This is discussed in our textbook Gibson. Behavioral theory. Behavioral theory believes a person can only learn to lead. They're not born leaders. Rather than evaluate the leader's qualifications, they study how a leader performs. That's discussed in our textbooks Clark. Behavior theory also focuses on skills that will be used later in life. They break down those skills in small components. I'm going to discuss an instrument used by managers that was discussed in the Blake and Mouton managerial grid. This tool is used to evaluate a leader's personality style of leading. This is the grid. After it's all tallied up, the scores are depicted from how a leader is perceived by herself and how a leader is perceived by her staff. The grid is used to help the leader understand, number one, her leadership abilities and also how her staff perceives her leadership abilities. The leader is positioned if she equals her staff to the task, that leader is usually labeled as a good leader. But if the leader is more focused on task, being higher than her staff, then she's more of a control type leader. A strength and weakness in regards to this behavioral style leadership. A strength is using this particular tool. It helps the manager evaluate their own leadership style. It encourages managers to think about their position in two areas, task-oriented and people-oriented. And also it makes it easier for an open discussion in regards to that leader's behavior. And also a lot of studies give this particular tool credibility in using it in the Fisher study. A weakness is it doesn't really give adequate relationship between the leader's behavior and their performance. And it also does not encourage flexibility in a way that a manager thinks and acts according to different circumstances within her organization. And it also it's a negative impact on internal and external constraints within that organization. Now, my perspective on this particular behavior skill and the tool that was used is within a task-oriented leader. It does state that this particular leader includes setting goals and planning and coordinating activities. The leader's primary goal is weighted on the job and making sure it's done professionally without regards to that staff's emotions or the staff's feelings. When the scores of the managerial grid, that leader is usually measuring a 9 and 1, stated in the Fisher article. And a relationship-oriented leader is usually treating her staff with kindness and respect, and she identifies and rewards her staff with their accomplishment in obtaining goals. That leader is usually scored a 9-1 on the managerial grid, which is she's making sure that her staff has a more comfortable environment. And this tool may be used in the present-day management. The managerial grid gives leaders and their staff the opportunity to compare what leaders believe, what they're doing and how they're doing, and how their staff is perceived, how their staff perceives them. It is also important to understand how and why your staff may or may not respect you in order to bring about a desirable outcome for your unit as well as your organization. Therefore, it's ideal for a leader to have a score of a 9-9 on the managerial grid. This leader has a high focus of task as well as her staff in mind. And the recommendations that I would give in using this leadership type of behavior is that the manager's goals are set. Usually a manager's goals is set by her superiors. It focuses on policies and guidelines. The leader, on the other hand, is focused on her staff and making sure that their well-being is the forefront of their mind. Therefore, if and when a problem should arise, using this managerial grid to determine the behavior of a leadership ability may be beneficial. Being an effective leader means being able to determine if your leadership style has stopped the influencing of your staff to moving forward towards the goal of the unit as well as the goal of the organization. Thank you for attending my lecture. Yes.
What constraints do you think will interfere with the results of the grid score?
Mary's question was, what constraints do I think would interfere with the grid score? A constraint as far as internal would be staff. Internal staff may be having some difficulties with their manager style. External constraints would be like finances that a company may be going through, and that's something that they cannot help, but it also affects the internal constraints. So finances is an external constraint, and a staff member that's being insubordinate would be an internal constraint in regards to affecting how they may grade their manager on the grid.
I have a question. If you had to choose between being a task-oriented manager, having a score of 9.1, or a people-oriented manager, score of 1.9, which would you choose and why?
I would probably choose being a people person, because that's what I am. Because I believe even though you still have to have the task at hand in mind, you still have to consider your staff as far as reaching those goals. So I prefer to be a people person. Any more questions? Thank you for attending my lecture.